Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Bramall Lane. Norwich City face Sheffield United this afternoon, and Norwich City's lineup is in. And the headline: Isaac Hayden gets his first start for the Canaries this afternoon. Dimitris Giannoulis and Todd Cantwell also return to the 11. So Norwich City line up like this: Gunning goal, Aarons, Hanley, Gibson, and Giannoulis as the back four. Hayden, and I would imagine that will be Nunez next to him, with a free of Cantwell, Ramsey and Sargent behind Teemu Pukki. Of course, formations are fluid, may well end up looking like something else. The subs bench: Tim Krul, Jordan Hugill, Daniel Sinani, Onel Hernandez, Tony Springett, Jonathan Tompkinson and Liam Gibbs. So a young-looking bench for the Canaries this afternoon. 3 changes for them in total. Just to run through that team again: Angus Gunn in goal, Aarons, Hanley, Gibson and Giannoulis the back four. Looks like Hayden will be alongside Marcelino Nunez, Cantwell on the left or right, Sargent on the left or right, with Ramsey behind Teemu Pukki. Subs bench: Tim Krul, Jordan Hugill, Daniel Sinani, Onel Hernandez, Tony Springett, Jonathan Tompkinson and Liam Gibbs. Paddy Davitt, I guess the headline is that Isaac Hayden has his first Norwich City start.
Yeah, I mean, I asked him directly about that yesterday. I think it was along the lines both him and Giannoulis needs, might, must, and this was obviously prior to Kenny McLean's appeal, in inverted commas, being upheld. But in the morning, he basically indicated both with Isaac and with Demi that it wouldn't be, or it would be far from an ideal situation, but needs, must, and certainly Giannoulis, once McLean was unavailable. Just checking there as you're reading through, there's no Byram, is there, Connor? No Byram. So had to be for left back and Dimmy, and that's a gamble. You know, a player who hasn't played much since the start of the season. Thank you. But you know, ultimately he has had a period of time to dial himself back in and at least be able to. You know, I guess Dean Smith's thinking is start him, and then if he tires, then hopefully the game's in the state of positivity for Norwich that you can then take him off later on. But and Hayden, well, again, you know, yesterday morning he said he'd played 45. That's all he felt he could handle at Watford in his first appearance for Norwich in a competitive game. First competitive outing of his last 12 months, really, since he damaged his knee originally for Newcastle in last December. Nature of the game midweek, he didn't feel he could turn to him until the last 10 minutes or so. And today, again, feels to me that these selections are probably reflective of the situation they're in, and that's coming here on the back of 3 defeats. Something needs to change, certainly in terms of results, but also performances. And by putting certainly Hayden in the mix, we saw even in a brief cameo at Watford before he inevitably tired that he does add a bit more experience, a bit more composure and calmness in a key area of the pitch. And Smith will be hoping he brings all that today. Nunez alongside him, if it is the 2 and the 3, I like that as well. I think that might help Nunez, who had just dipped in his own performance levels. And Cantwell, I like that as well. I like the fact that he's gone with Cantwell and with Ramsey as well. You know, there's clearly a lot of latent creative potential by pairing those two together. And good that Sargent is okay, you know, given he had to go off midweek. So, you know, I'm quickly looking down the list of subs. Gibbs drops out. Obviously, but no McLean.
No Gabby Sara either.
No Gabby Sara at all, which is a surprise. That clearly you would have to think, given I thought he was decent midweek, would have to be an injury or a fitness concern. We'll obviously put that to Dean Smith after the game, but certainly there was no hint from Dean Smith that there was any issue with any of the other ones that we didn't know about who featured in midweek, i.e. Byram, i.e. McLean, i.e. Sargent. So, and Dowell, of course, who's unavailable today. But if I look at those 18, if they're the 18 he had available, I think I'd be inclined to go with that 11 as well. And as you rightly caveated, we won't assume the shape is a 2 and a 3 in Pukki at the top end. But if it is, Hayden and Nunez has more than a sense of that's how it could be if they gel and they offer a little bit of ballast defensively. And then obviously with the ball, it might free Nunez to get further forward and go up and support Ramsey and go up and support Cantwell to try and get Pukki and Sargent into those really dangerous attacking parts of the pitch. So yeah, all in all, I'll be interested how it's going down with our audience and Norwich fans more generally. But I like that. I like some of the changes. I like what that says. I like the signal that sends. And ultimately now Dean Smith has done what he can in terms of selections. And it's up to this 11 to go onto the pitch against the team who haven't won in 5. It's worth reiterating and put on a performance. And more importantly for me, get a result today. And then they can roll on to Burnley with a bit more renewed optimism. Certainly the 2,700 over to my left, they'll want to hope for that they see a Norwich team performing to the levels we know, if you look at the individuals available, they're capable of. And we haven't seen that nowhere near enough this season, but particularly in these last 3 games. And hence, as a result, the results have gone the other way as well. So, yeah, it feels like a big afternoon for many reasons. But chief among them is they have to stop this rot and have to get back to certainly positive results and ideally a win.
Yeah, just to give you some other shape variables that could feasibly end up as a diamond with Campbell and Nunez behind Ramsey, with obviously Isaac Hayden at the base. I could see that being a 4-3-3. We'll see exactly how it pans out when we get closer to kickoff. I'll just read you the Sheffield United team. They, of course, are in a bad run of form. Both teams find themselves in the top 6 of the Championship, with the bottom 3 of the form table, both with just 1 win in 6 games. They line up like this with a 3 at the back, as you would perhaps expect from Chris Wilder's Sheffield United. Paul Heckingbottom has kept a lot of the same structures that Wilder had great success with. So they line up like this: Davis in goal, Baldock, Basham, Egan, and Mazedovic, who's a very good player, and Osborne as their back 5. Norwood and Fleck, the midfield pivot, with McAtee behind Brewster and Billy Sharp. Their subs: Amiso, Robinson, Biabu, Doyle, Kadra and Day, who's been very good this year, and Ollie McBurney, who I think Daniel Farker was raving about a few years ago. Pad, for so long the discussion amongst Norwich City fans have been, particularly when perhaps from the camp who have been keener to reserve judgment on Dean Smith, wait until he has Dimitris Giannoulis, Isaac Hayden back in a Norwich City 11. It does, and even though they're not fully fit, so we may have to pull away from that particular discourse at this moment in time, but certainly this looks like a much more balanced Norwich City lineup, irrespective of what shape they end up in.
It does, but yeah, I would like still to see how he's deploying them. But if it is, let's just focus on the 3 behind Pookie. If you've got a Campbell and you've got a Ramsey and you've got a Sargent, but you've got the support defensively and protection of a Hayden and a Nunez in behind, and immediately, you're less concerned about seeing Campbell and seeing seeing Ramsey in there, because without that protection in behind them, the concern is what happens when Norwich get turned over, when they lose the ball, when that back 4, which as we saw midweek, was very vulnerable again in the key moment that decided that game against Luton. You would have major concerns, but I just think with Hayden, a natural holding midfielder, Premier League grade, all the experience in the world. Physically, he looks the part as well. He's a big, powerful, robust operator. That has to give the likes of Campbell, the likes of Ramsey, the platform to really connect the dots. And you just hope it is Sargent with the licence to get in and around Pookie. And of course, worth reiterating in this conversation that with Giannoulis now, you have that natural width and balance going down the left-hand side that may allow Sargent to play a bit closer to Pookie. So, yeah, you immediately look at that 11, you sort of assume it's the 2-3-1, and you feel there's a comfort to that, or there's a sense that players maybe be asked to do jobs that they're comfortable with, and that as a result, Norwich's overall performance should hopefully be far more cohesive than it has been, too often this season. And then ultimately you feel in this team with those players they will create chances, and then it goes back to what Dean Smith said after the game on Tuesday, but also again reiterated yesterday, that if they create chances they have to take them, and certainly a player like Pookie, if he gets the type of chances he had against Luton, we need to see him step up, take those, and then it's a different dynamic. Then if you get yourself in front, then the game changes. Then you're playing against a team who are no win in 5. This crowd, in my experience, every time I've been here, they do get on their backs if things aren't going well. And Norwich can play on that. Norwich can feed off that. But, ultimately, we need to see far more. I still feel there's a bit of hope rather than expectation because of what we've seen too often this season, and particularly in the last 3 games, that it's looked far too disjointed and far more the pieces are getting thrown together and hopefully comes together. I think today it feels like maybe that he's got the right pieces in the right parts of the pitch, and that should give them a fighting chance to put a performance on the pitch, which is good enough to get a result. Because there's no doubt, despite all the angst at the minute, pound for pound, I don't look around the Championship and see any group of players that are better than this group of players. So if that's the case, and they can be coached well, and the right tactics for the right opponents, and the right demands placed on individuals within the team unit, then it's not arrogance to state, and Dean Smith said it himself, this group of players shouldn't be losing 2 on the spin. Well, they've lost 3 on the spin now in this league. That's not good enough. That's below par for this group of players. So today, no excuses really. If you're Todd Cantwell and you're being asked to play in an advanced area, then there's no excuse for him not to go and perform and show what he's capable of. Likewise, Hayden. If you're asking Hayden to do what he's done for Newcastle, he should be capable of doing that at this level. So, again, we'll wait until the kick-off. We'll see what the shape is. But if it is that shape, then it's really the onus then for me shifts away from Dean Smith and what he isn't doing or what he is doing to what do these players do. Because I think if he's asking these players to play in that shape, then it's on to the players to live up to what we feel is their billing, which is as good as any in this division.
Yeah, what sort of game are you expecting, Pat? Because like we said, 2 teams who have started the season relatively well, certainly when you cast your eye to the league table. Obviously, Norwich have fallen away from that top 2. They currently sit in 6th. Sheffield United sat at the top of the division for the longest period, certainly longer than any other team have so far this season. Both teams find themselves in the bottom 3 of the form table with 1 win in 6, although both coaches would probably point to some mitigation in those runs. Certainly with Sheffield United, had a spate of injuries, some players who are not involved today, some players who are working their way back, similarly as opposed to Norwich with the pieces that they're involved in. But are you expecting a game based on what we see in terms of league position, or are you expecting a game in terms of what we see in terms of form table? Because I think they're probably 2 different prospects.
I think inevitably, given it's 2 teams who aren't in the best of form, I think it might be a little bit, to start with, a bit fractured and a bit disjointed. Unless one or the other get their noses in front, and then the confidence may come back. Dean Smith talked about confidence. He felt in the key moments there's a lack of that at the minute, which is understandable when you've got the expectations that Norwich have on their shoulders and they're not producing to those levels. That does bring a degree of sort of lack of self-confidence. But in terms of the type of game, I thought it was, unless it's a double bluff from Heckingbottom, he said they've got to attack Norwich today. And is that a message to his players to perform in front of these fans, that these fans will expect them to push Norwich back and get on the front foot? And if that is the case, then that tells me Norwich will have to be obviously good defensively, that back 6 in front of Angus Gunn. But it also would suggest that there will be opportunities for Norwich maybe to counter. And if that is the case, then again it comes back to how clinical can they be at the top end of the pitch, and how watertight at the other end. And by that I mean individually and collectively, those mistakes, those errors have started to creep in again. And I know Dean Smith was keen to not absolve Ben Gibson, but certainly share the responsibility for the manner of Luton's build-up. But fundamentally, it's a player who's lost the ball in a dangerous area of the pitch. And from that, Luton were very clinical. We need to see less of that individually and collectively, that abdication of responsibility. And if they've got a platform and they're in games, then they have the potency. As Dean Smith said, they've got a player in Just Sargent who, for all the debate about where he should play and where he's most effective, he's the top scorer, joint top scorer in the division. In team with Pukki over the last 2 full seasons in the Championship, there's no one better, prolific at this level. So they have goals in this side. What they need to do is unlock their potential. And to do that, they need to have a good structure defensively, a good structure out of possession. And if they do that, as I say, against a team who are no winning 5, against a very demanding home support here, the longer it goes and Norwich are on level terms or even better ahead, then it might flip, and it's like the fragility of the Sheffield United players, because they will be feeling it after their start this season. A club who, like Dean Smith said on Friday, in that pack, who've recently been in the Premier League and are desperate to get back there again. They've spent money over the last 2 or 3 seasons. There is an expectancy on them as well. And if Norwich are in this game or even ahead in this game, then we might start to see that vulnerability in the home ranks. So it's a really, really intriguing dynamic today. You've got 2 teams who will expect to be doing better themselves, whatever external pressure there is, and both of them have hit the buffers of late. So it might be a nervy affair to start with, but ultimately that's where you want your experienced players to step up, come to the fore, and come through that and drag their teammates with them. And then ultimately, if Norwich get back on that coach tonight and they've got a positive result, then the world looks a brighter place, doesn't it?
Score prediction, Pad, off the back of that?
I hadn't given it any thought whatsoever, to be honest. I'm gonna say draw. I think it might be a case both teams will have their periods, but when you're on the runs they're on, it might be go hell for leather, and then as the game reaches the final conclusion, you're thinking, well, maybe we've lost in Norwich's case 3 on the spin, in Sheffield United's case no win in 5. There may be a truce break out, but I certainly would like to think Norwich are capable of coming here and getting a result. But maybe it won't be the complete turnaround we're all hoping for. Maybe that'll have to wait for Burnley. But I think they're good enough to come here and get a result today. Yourself, Connor? Draw? I'm going draw.
Good man, Paddy. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you all very much for watching. Of course, this is Bramall Lane. 3,000 Norwich City fans just in that bottom tier of that stand as you look at it. It's going to be an interesting afternoon here against two teams who are desperate for a win to maybe not revive their season. That's probably a bit strong, but certainly to turn around what has been a little bit of a blip for both of them, or what they're hoping to prove is just a little bit of a blip. Thank you very much for watching. Of course, Pinkin.com and the Pinkin Plus app, the place to go for all the coverage this afternoon and analysis and reaction. And we will see you later on. Thank you very much for watching.